SaaS Therapy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of SaaS Therapy. My name is Todd Kirk. I am your host, and this is the show where we help you save your most important business relationships, your customers. I'm joined by my ever-present and world-trotting companion, Casey Trujillo. He has been, I think, in a different city or state every week for the last 2 months. So Casey, man, I'm glad you made it. I think you're probably hopping on a flight tonight, if I'm not wrong.
That is, well, as soon as we get done recording this podcast, that is right. I'm headed out to my fellow people in Texas and Dallas, Texas. So excited to go out and be with them and be there at an event. So yes, TK, I just can't stop traveling for some reason.
I know. Well, I think secretly he's Santa Claus. That NORAD tracker, if you pull it up, it's basically where Casey's been. I honestly don't know how he's squeezing in time to be on these with me. But we're super pumped for today's episode. We are joined by Debbie Smith. Debbie is somebody that I think Casey and I now have probably known for at least a year, maybe coming up on 2. We met Debbie a while ago because she is the president of CEdMA, the Customer Education Management Association. She's also the senior director of education at Visier. And we are pumped to have you on, Debbie. We are so glad you're here. Welcome to SaaS Therapy.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to get on with you too, and always enjoy listening to you. So thanks for having me.
Well, Debbie, you're one of the people that is, if I'm Santa Claus, and I don't even know what to say Debbie is, because she's doing everything. She's running this organization, CEdMA. And Debbie, I want you to talk just a little bit more about it, what it's for. Talk about your conference. We've been to it the past 2 years. It just grows. It's wonderful. But I want you to give a plug for CEdMA because it's something that needs to keep growing. People need to know, hey, where do I go to? There's always customer success conferences. There's always technology conferences. But one for customer education, it's tough to find a good one. And so, Debbie, would you mind spending a little bit time? We didn't tell her we were going to do this, but would you spend some time talking about it and telling everyone about it and why they should, how they join, how they be part of this?
Sure. So CEdMA's actually been around longer than customer success has been around. CEdMA has been around since 1999. And it started out as the Computer Education Management Association. And around 2016, 2017, they actually switched the name to Customer Education Management. And then we did a legal change last year. So I've been the president for 2 years now. I've been on the board for 6 years. And we've made a lot of changes, and there's still more changes to come. And the changes that we've made is we're really bringing it into a more modern organization. And this year we're going through a whole new tech stack. And the reason we're going through a tech stack is because we want to make it easier for our members to really access things and communicate. We, besides our membership site, we also have a Slack site, which is a paid Slack site, so we don't lose the history. So that way we always have that. And it's a vibrant community. This year, our conference was in Austin, and it was phenomenal to see the energy. We had people from all around the world. We had people of all ages and from all different types of organizations. CEdMA, when it started out, it was more the big enterprise companies, and it was more ed services, how to sell. Everything was about selling it. And now it's really comprehensive education. And as we're watching education change, education is really shifting to be the full customer experience. So many of us, besides running the education program, we also run a community program or a communication or knowledge base or docs. And these are all coming in together to be the real customer experience. And so CEdMA is a place where you can come and talk about all of that. So we do have the Slack channel. We'll do another conference next year in Austin. And in between that, we're also going to do a one-day session at DevLearn. So we're going to do a pre-con day at DevLearn this year, which will be really exciting. It'll be a great way to really talk to a lot more people. So if you're interested in joining CEdMA, we'd love to have you. You can go to CEdMA.org and sign up for a membership. We have either individual memberships, or we have what we call the named user membership, which is for a company who wants to have 5, 10, 15 people. And some of our sponsors are now buying named users and giving them to their customers to help really bring everyone together in customer education, because we're an organization that really learns from each other. And as I tell people all the time, we don't teach people so they learn. We teach people to drive the business outcomes. It's really about preventing churn, about driving growth, cutting support tickets. It's all of those business metrics that we exist for. So it's a really cool organization. And we are an all volunteer board. So we have a lot of fun volunteering, and we do it to give back.
It's so good. Debbie, as somebody who's now attended a couple of times, I can say that I've always really enjoyed the format there of the conference. And I've learned a lot personally about what it's like being in customer education. There can be people who are trying to figure out what their place is in the organization. They're trying to figure out how to help their business better understand the importance of education and the impact that it's having. And so what's also interesting to me is I've noticed at least one of the talks this year focused a lot on how different people, how education is viewed within the organization. Some people are underneath support. Some people are underneath customer success. Some are in product marketing, and some are their own org that feels like they're left out on an island and nobody cares about them. And so what's interesting, and I'd love to maybe kick off this conversation today, is for kind of that fledgling young customer education pro who's just starting to come on board and learn how this works. How do you help them understand the market and the landscape of like how they should be thinking about it in their own careers as they look to develop over time?
Yeah, so you're right. Customer education can fall under anyone, which is really interesting because I personally have done customer education under HR, product, sales, marketing, professional services, and customer success, and now customer excellence. So I've actually been on all of those teams for customer education, and they all have their pros and cons. I personally like to see it as a freestanding organization. And the reason I like to see it freestanding, preferably under the customer experience and reporting directly into the C-suite. And the reason that I think it needs to be that is because it's truly a cross-functional relationship that it has with everyone. We can help impact all business metrics. We can help with education qualified leads. We help with product adoption for your product marketing and product managers, churn, sales, all of it. We do all of it. So if you're starting out in customer education, what's most important is that you build those cross-functional relationships no matter where you are.
Yeah.
Because you won't stay on that team for long. You don't stay on teams usually for more than 3 to 5 years before they shift you to another C-suite. Eventually they end up right under the chief customer officer, usually, if there's a chief customer officer. But until it finds that home and until you start proving your worth, you will float around depending on who has the money and who has a specific need that they're trying to get you to fill for them. So you have to be super flexible in customer education, and you have to think like a true business owner. We are a business function, and you have to remember that you're truly a business function. You need to understand everyone's metrics and how you all play together. You can't be just focused on the learning. If you come into customer education and you are just focused on the learning, you're not going to succeed. But if you're just focused on the business, you're also not going to succeed, because learning is the tool that we use to drive our business. So you have to have that learning and that business piece to really drive it through.
We've had many people on our show that have tried to explain that principle, but you just did it the best. That was fantastic. Well done. You are an expert in many areas, and one we want to maybe jump into a little bit deeper is certifications. So again, a lot of organizations, a lot of SaaS organizations, they maybe have a certification program. Some say, gosh, we don't need a certification program. Others, that is like their main metric is, okay, we had this many certifications last year. Let's set a goal to double it, right?
Yep.
Debbie, explain to the audience. Let's pretend that they didn't understand certification. What is a certification? Why do people find value in it? And let's take it from there. And then I'm sure Todd's going to dive into some good questions off of that. But let's just set the background for what is a certification? Why do some people believe that a certification is so important to their business?
So certification in the U.S., actually, people get upset when I do this sometimes, but I'm doing it anyways. I'm going there. Certification actually falls under the labor laws of 1999. It has a legal definition and legal ramifications. For most of us in SaaS, it's not going to bother us. Microsoft has been sued a couple times, and they have won both suits. On the other hand, the state police in Massachusetts were sued, and they lost. And why did they lose? And it was a multi-million-dollar lawsuit that they lost to, because they didn't follow the process, and the exam wasn't fair, valid, and reliable. So even if you don't want to talk about the legal implications of certification, certification has to be fair, it has to be valid, and it has to be reliable. So there's a process that you follow to make sure that it's true. The other thing that the labor laws tell us is that certification cannot be mandated to be tied to a training. So if you were doing a training and calling it a certification, that is not a certification. That is a certificate of completion, and there is a difference. And why does this matter? This is where I got really excited. So I've been doing customer education for a long, long time. But when I was at a small startup, I was running a certification program. And I had the metrics to tie it into. And I showed that people who took e-learning had 11% higher ARR. Cool. People who took instructor-led training had a 20-25% increase in ARR. Great. Even more impressive, my certified builders had a 69% increase in ARR, and we had 0 churn. There's the metrics right there that got me hooked into customer education and make me want to stay in it, because certification really does have a huge impact. Is it right for every company at the beginning of the company? No. But as soon as you have partners, you need certification. So that's a key twisting point. If you are putting partners in place, you have to have certification. Why? Because if you're not certifying them, you don't know what they're doing. And I've been at companies where we had training programs for partners, and we did some A/B testing and put some through just the training and some through the certification. The ones who went through the training without doing the certification did not succeed, and on average cost us $50,000 per partner in rework. Every one of the ones who went through the certification was able to do it successfully, and we didn't have to do any rework for them. So I am a firm believer in certification.
Oh, Debbie. Okay. Casey was right when he said that I would have lots of questions here. So you're reminding me of a former life. So early in my career, I actually worked as a contract employee for Microsoft for probably like 3 or 4 years. And as part of that, my job was to run one of their most successful sales and marketing campaigns. But that campaign was a training campaign. So I basically started in professional services. But that program was designed to train partners to facilitate a half-day consultative session with executive leadership for Microsoft customers as they were moving from on-prem to the cloud. Yep. So then you mentioned Microsoft getting sued twice. What's interesting is I remember during this time period, there was this big debate with Microsoft about whether or not they would call it a certification or a qualification. And ultimately, I think maybe because it was a time around when they were getting sued around that, they ended up calling it this partner qualification. Like, you're a qualified partner, you're not a certified partner. Yep. And it was like at the time, I remember, this is so funny. Like, why this is just semantics, but you're basically saying, well, no, there's a legal definition of a certification, and you got to be careful about how you present that. So that was a lot of context to say that was fun, because you reminded me of a blast from the past in the early days of what we did. But now I have a follow-up question for you, because you mentioned certification there's so much value in at least making sure that your partners know how to speak your language, understand your product, and can support your customers well. But does it need to be a certification, or is a qualification sufficient? You know what I mean? How do you determine that level of commitment into the design of your program?
So the qualification is different than the certification. The qualifications we usually issue for completing training. The problem with that is if you take, say, even a biology course, right? You take a biology course, you go take your biology test, you remember it because you crammed for that test right then because you were studying for it. But if you took that test 3 months later, you probably wouldn't do as good. That's what's different about a certification, because the certification is actually the knowledge that you've learned. And it's not tied to the training. So it's actually testing your skills. And when a certification is done right and valid, If I take it now and if I take it 3 months from now, I'm probably going to get about the same score, plus and minus a small delta. So one is verifying skills and one is teaching the skills. So it depends on what you really are trying to do. And it also depends on who you're working with, because most people aren't going to sue you for a certification. The only people that are really going to sue you for certification are government employees and union employees. And there's a reason for it, because those certifications actually affect their pension in the long run. So it can cost them money, right? So that's really, you have to think about who your clientele is. Now, with my partners, I want to know for sure that they can do it. I want to know that they didn't just do the training. The other thing when we do training is we don't proctor training. And especially in today's AI, is it a bot taking your training? Is it a deep fake taking your training? You're going to have a harder time getting a deep fake through a certification with the proctoring, with the imagery and everything that we do for that. So it's really the only way that you're going to know that it's actually the people doing it is if you do a certification. So I would say if you're doing partners, you really do want to do a certification. Now, you can call them a qualified partner based on the number of certifications they have. You can call them an accredited partner. There's lots of different words you can use. But you want to do a tiered level of certification to give you your qualifications.
Wow. All right. Thought I feel like I could be certified on this, on how to do a certification now. I'm learning all these.
Liar.
Cool.
I'll test you tomorrow, and we know you won't remember a word of it.
All right, that's a fair point. Debbie, okay, so you said one of the key indicators, if you want to look at doing a certification, is partners. You gave some strong statistics around that. If I'm not going through partners, is there ever a reason why I would want to do a certification?
Yes. So if you have a platform that you're building on, if you have a platform that's more than just an application, but if there's a lot of complexity to it, and your software is in job descriptions, people want that certification to prove they have the knowledge. The other thing that's going to happen, I believe, in this new age that we're living in with all the shifts of AI, is we're going to start really being more concerned about micro-credentials, such as certification, than we are college degrees. And we started to see this shift in 2020 anyways, where we stopped requiring degrees for a lot of our jobs. Most jobs in SaaS, a degree is nice to have, but not required. But certifications show that you actually went and learned a skill and have a skill to do something. And having that skill, I think, is going to be even more important as you're working with AI. I mean, you take an intern and have an intern do a job, let's say just marketing, for example. They can come up with some cool marketing stuff using AI, but you take an experienced marketer who really understands the customer and uses AI, they're going to produce a much higher quality with more accurate words. And the same thing with education. When we're creating learning, I can tell when my instructional designers have just written it with ChatGPT or with Gemini, right? Yeah, it's almost right, but it's not quite right. So when they have a certification and they really know and have that expertise, they're going to write it differently and they're going to dig deeper. They're going to use the AI to help them get it done faster, but they're not going to rely just on the AI. So I think AI is actually going to force us more into certification.
Okay, I love that. I think the example that I see, where Casey and I live, we both live in Silicon Slopes. That's Utah. So big tech town, obviously, in Salt Lake City. And there's been a lot of like dev camps where people, instead of going to get a 4-year degree, take a summer-long boot camp to learn how to be a software engineer and then go get a job for $80K right out without even having to go to college, right? So we are starting to see that more fast, specialized skill set. I love that comment around, when and why you would want to do a certification for your customers. I am curious. A lot of times there's a fear around the risk of certification, and a lot of that, it seems like, where the risk would be is like on the partner and the representation level. Is there a risk of getting sued by a student who is using this for their job? Or like, how should you be thinking about this differently with a customer going through a certification or an end user going through a certification versus a partner that is going through a certification?
So the only time you'd ever have a risk is if if your test wasn't reliable and valid. So if you went and if you wrote 100 questions, and a really good indicator that a certification probably isn't a true certification is when you see a passing score of 80. No one because that's sort of an education. We pick 80 or 85 or 75 just off the top of our head. We haven't actually done the right calculations to figure out what the cut score is. So it's only if someone gets a job and they didn't get a job because they were both certified. So the chances of a suit there aren't a big deal. The people push back, and I know I have friends who push back on certification because they say it takes too long to do it and it's too cumbersome. Well, you know what? It's not if you set up your training correctly from the beginning. So when you're starting to think about your training catalog, if you start with a jobs to be done framework and start listing out what are the major jobs that everyone's doing, and then what are all the tasks, you build your courses to the tasks. Then when you go to do your certification, you already have your job task analysis done. Right? So that part's really easy. And the other thing is when I first started doing certification, people told me it took 18 months to do a certification. 3 months, I can get a certification start to finish and out the door, right? So it's not as big a deal. I know people who take longer than that to develop courses today. So you can do it much faster, but that's a lot of the hesitation. And then it's just the questions around really the statistics. But, if you've played in data enough, it's just fun to figure out those stats. And a lot of the software can help us figure out that stats as far as, some of the software I use shows all of the values right next to it. So I can tell real easily how to do it. So it's really not that difficult. And the risk really it's not a huge risk.
Wow. That was going to be my question. Is like, how long does this take? Like, I'm so curious now. I'm like, I want to get, and then you just answered that question. So Debbie, this is, I'm going to tell you right now, this is not a fair question. So I'm just going to lay that out there. So don't worry about the answer on this. It's not a fair question because it depends. Like, that's the answer you should give me, is it depends. But we're going to pretend that that's not an answer. Okay. So I am a SaaS organization. I've, maybe gone through, my Series B funding, and we're really getting serious. We need to escalate. I can only put my resources in one area. I have an academy. I have a community. I want to get a certification going. Where do I start? Do I put more emphasis on a community? Do I put more emphasis on an academy? Or do I go do this certification? Like, how do people juggle all these things? Because I know communities, they have great data points to say, hey, if you get your people into communities and they do XXX, it's going to lead to retention. And your academy's saying the same thing. Like, I guess the question is all three of these areas, is it just you put equal effort in all three areas? And I'm going to take off the table, it depends. But where do you feel like your biggest bang for your buck is in an academy, certification, community? Which one would you maybe put your wage some money on which one would have the most impact? And again, I know it's an unfair question because you have like so many questions to ask me, like what type of software is it and blah, 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 blah. But let's just say all those things are the same. Where would you put some emphasis?
So I would start with building my academy first. If I have one person, I'm going to build an academy. If I have two people, I'm going to build the academy and the certification. And if I have three people, I'm going to do the academy, certification, and community.
See, she just went at it. She just attacked it. Okay, Debbie, why? Why did you say it that way? And why did you attach resources to that? Like you said, if I had one person, I'd start here. Like walk us through how you think about this.
Because you need some training out there for everyone. And the thing is we're thinking about customer education, but really what we're talking about is customer product education. So the use cases, how are people actually using it? Your customer education isn't just for customers. And if it is just for customers, you're doing it wrong. Your customer education has to be for your internal people. And I am a firm believer that everyone in the company needs to learn how to use the software. My instructional designers and learning experience designers are product experts. They don't come to me that way, but they become product experts right away. My certification person also becomes a product expert. They do this so that way they can train everyone internally, because your sales reps can't sell your product really well if they don't know it. They're going to sell vaporware on you. And let's face it, CS teams really hate when sales sells vaporware, right? So do your customers. And then they churn. So if your sales reps are educated, They know what customers are trying to do with your product, what problems they're solving, and it's written from that customer first mentality. You're solving a problem for your sales enablement team. You're also solving a problem for your CS team because they need to understand it. When you have new product marketers and new product managers come in, they need to understand more than just the engineering side of it and more than just the product side. They need to understand the customer side. So we're that connection between all of it. Certification is going to prove that your teams, your internal teams know it. They're going to prove that your partners know it. And then they're going to prove your customers know it. So your certification is there. Your community, you want to build a community around your certified users. Those are your champions. You know what your certified users are going to do for you? They're going to sell more products. They are going to promote your product more often than anyone else. Because why are they going to do it? It sort of makes sense if you think about it. They have a vested interest. They've spent their own time and energy learning this product. And now that I've got enough that I'm actually going and saying I'm certified in it, I'm going to actually tell other people to use it because it makes me an expert. It makes me know things that and I can help people with it. And so you get all that around it. So you really raise champions. And one of the biggest ways to raise champions is around certification.
Okay. So, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right, Debbie? Because basically you have, let's say you have no one invested in your ecosystem at all. First thing you got to do is you got to enable someone so that they become invested. Then you need to reward them for being invested. Once they're rewarded and invested, now they can become your advocates and help other people in the ecosystem. And so it's a building. So it seems like a really natural process. You know, the thing that I think is interesting, and I want to switch the topic a little bit, because for me, what I find fascinating, or that I see a lot of the times with the companies we talk to, is there is a lot of leak in the funnel, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say I have a potential set of 500,000 users who could go and be enabled and consume learning. I'm not getting very many of them to that first point. But the people who I do get there, I probably have less drop off from that to certification and less drop off from certification to engagement with the broader community. So like the interesting part is, where do you see the leaks in the funnel that are preventing people from getting from that front end all the way to that advocacy level, or even just to the certification level? Because we fail so often at getting anybody to engage with that first level of learning.
Yeah, so it's making it one of the hardest parts, I think, about customer education is selling customer education internally. You have to actually sell it to your sellers and sell it to your CS and sell it to your product marketing and sell it to your marketing teams. And then customer education material content makes great marketing. Marketing content does not make good customer education, right? So they can use your material to actually market your product. When we do customer education, we don't educate them just on the products they sell. And you hear people all the time saying, oh, I only want them to use the pieces and features they bought. No. I'm going to show you every feature, and I'm going to show you the coolest features and why it's more important. So you have to drive it with inspirational use cases. If you are doing what I call old school product training, which is talking about clicking the buttons and, click on the blue button, click on the green button, no one wants to take that. No one's interested in it. But if I can show you how you can save X amount of hours by doing this thing in my product instead of having to do it another way, that's going to be a hook that gets you excited. So it's really making sure you're drawing that inspiration out. So where do we see the leaks? We see the leaks when customer education isn't talked about by all parts of the company. So for me at Visier, first thing I did when I came here is I opened my LMS up so that anyone can create an account on my training. And so we do use it for lead gen now. So we have lead gen there. We tell our prospects, come take it, come practice with it, learn the product before you do. And customers who come in and or prospects who come in and start using it, they tend to be better customers and they're more prepped and their implementations go smoother. So I see that is the bigger point. The biggest place though that I see leaks is when you have different buyers and different than your users. If your user is not your buyer, a lot of time it's a top-down directive on what they have to use. And so then you really have to do inspirational use cases and hook them in. The concept of onboarding people once, that doesn't even make sense in today's world. The average director role in SaaS, most people are there for 12 to 18 months as a director or above, right? So think about that turnover. So that means every year you have to re-onboard your customers. We also sometimes call it everboarding. So you have to constantly be coming out with new and interesting training, new and interesting ideas to pull them in. And then if you get a certified person at a company, they will encourage everyone else to come do it with you. And they'll encourage everyone else to take the certification courses. And right now we have at Busier, we have our conferences going on. And my team is at the conference doing pre-con training, which we started last year for the first time. They had never done pre-con training. We have 2 full day, 8-hour sessions where they're going through training hands-on with demo environments, really learning how to do everything hands-on. Those people who came last year were so impressed by what they did. They were going out and telling everyone to come take the training for us, right? So they're helping us sell the training, but they're also helping us sell our product. So it's really that inspirational and a cross-functional that we need to use in order to help those leaks.
Well, Debbie, I'll say this. If people haven't signed up for CEdMA already, just because of what you've done on this podcast, they're crazy because of what value just off of you. And again, there's the Dave Darringtons, there's all these amazing people that attend these sessions and giving this type of consultation to you. So another shout out for CEdMA. Debbie, if you ever decided not to do customer education, you could definitely sell certifications. I'm sold, like 1,000% I'm in. So just want to give you that feedback. What are the 5 things to be aware of when you're creating a certification? What are the things that, okay, you're going to get frustrated if you're not walking in with this? One of the things I loved is we had Max, and I'm going to butcher Max's last name, so I won't say it, but he's over at CDW, and he was talking, okay, is your product ready to go into the channel? Here are the 5 do's and don'ts with going into the channel. And they were just rock solid. And it's like, oh man, that was a good one. That probably saved somebody countless hours and millions of dollars in understanding how to go to the channel and if you're ready or not. Debbie, what would be some advice? You've sold everybody on why you should do a certification. The data was awesome. What are the things that you need to be aware of so it doesn't take you 18 months or 24 months and nobody takes your certification and you invested that time and money? What are some things that people should be aware of around that?
Project management is huge. Really being able to manage a project and set the timelines out right from the beginning. So, and it being able to explain, so it's project management, explaining what the process is, explaining how people can be involved in the process and what the reward is for them. I always give my SMEs badges or give them something so that they can put that out on their LinkedIn profile too, so they get that something else for it. Making sure you have a process that's easy to follow and having guidelines for people who are doing your reviews so that it's project management. I just lost the 5 in a row. How good was that? So yeah, project management, understanding the entire process, being able to explain the process, rewarding the SMEs, and then giving people examples and teaching people how to do it. People want to be subject matter experts. And when you give them a badge that says they're a subject matter expert in something, they'll really, they really dive in to help you, because it's wrangling cats really to get it done. And you need that executive buy-in, right? Because it does take some time for SME reviews. And so you have to have that cross-functional relationships.
Okay. By the way, Max's last name is Allschlager. Casey, that's why you couldn't remember it. So anyway, if you want to go back and listen to that, he's a guy in the partner space. So also very fascinating when you think about certifications for partners versus your end customers. I would be curious. So there's kind of a 2-part question, Debbie. So I'm sorry, we don't script out these questions. So if it's a complicated question, it's convoluted. That's just because I didn't prep and think what I was going to ask you here. But so 2 parts. One is, so partner and customer. It sounds like you would recommend you start with partner generally, because your certification program needs to be around if you have anybody else trying to represent you externally. So maybe that's right. But on the secondary question is, when in the journey for the customer does it make sense to start telling them about the certification? You know, if you push this idea of getting certified really early when they're not really invested or know who you are or what you are, like, does the reward have any meaning, or is it going to fall on deaf ears? So I guess 2 parts there, right? Is A, am I right that you would still say start with partners, or is there exceptions to that rule? And then B, when do you introduce it to people at all in their journey so that you make sure that it doesn't get lost on them?
Great questions. Great questions. So there's a reason I start with partners first. It doesn't have to be partners first, but partners are usually willing to fund you first. So when there's a funding issue, so, you know, one of the things that we learn in business is try to figure out who the payer is, right? And it's when you're selling software, when you're doing anything in the company, who's the payer? Who's got the budget to give you the money to do what you need to do? That money usually comes from partners first. Partners usually have more money for that because it's a bigger risk for them. So that's usually why I'll start with partners, but I have done it for customers first or partners first, but usually that's, if I'm looking for money, I go to a partner team for money. So there's that. You don't want to start talking about certification when you're onboarding someone or pre-sale. You don't, because if you're pre-sale, your software sounds too hard to use. If you're onboarding people and you're talking about certification, it's too hard to use. If you want to start talking about certification, though, there's another cool place to really talk about certification. And it's actually to people who aren't even customers yet. And this is one of my favorite places to talk about certification. And that is with college professors. College professors love software training in their courses. Whatever vertical you're in, whatever you're selling to. If you're marketing, you talk to marketing professors and you get them interested in your certification, and they have their students become certified. Then what you're doing is you're pulling in a whole new wave of people who already know your software and want to use your software before they're even in the business space. So that's a fun way to really introduce it too.
Jeez. Okay. I didn't think we were going there, Todd.
I wasn't sure if my question was going to make any sense, and then that was a great answer. So basically what you would say is you either need to start really, really early to focus on people who aren't in the job market yet, so that now they're getting exposure to the fact that your software is something that they might use as part of their career. And that's a really good way to kind of kickstart someone's interest in your ecosystem. Or after they've signed on, after they've been enabled, after they've started learning, now be like, hey, now that you understand and are enabled and are using this software, let me reward you by empowering you with something that helps you see how great you are. Right? Is that fair? And by the way, I love this idea of charging the partner. And because that's the dollar source. I mean, obviously certification usually has a cost, but the fact that they'd be the one probably willing to pay first, otherwise you're setting up certifications and you're probably having to just give them away. And at that point, it may not be as worth it because now you're not going to be able to show that value and get the monetization out of it.
Exactly right. And yeah, it's, I've actually started these programs, and one company I was working with, we were bringing it down to the high school level.
Jeez. That's amazing.
Think about it. When you're doing it at the high school level, if you bring a program into a high school level, high school kids still go home and talk to their parents about everything they're doing at school, especially when they're doing something cool in technology. So you're getting the marketing up to the parents. The other thing is that if your company is socially minded, there are a lot of programs for veterans, for homeless, re-entry programs. And so they're always looking for it. So a lot of times I've gone into these programs and I've done some training for software and then offered certification around it too. So there's a lot of different things that you can do that can have social impact too.
Wow. I got to just say, Debbie, for me, I'm a person who has always viewed certifications as kind of just a necessary evil. Like, I kind of hate them, right? Like, that's just the honest truth from me. Yep. And you're really changing my perspective. of it's not just that it doesn't have to be a necessary evil. It could actually be something that is really beneficial to your organization. But it's a pretty big mindset shift, I think, for a lot of people. Because like so much of what you've said, I agree with, right? Certifications make things seem complicated. It makes your software hard and not accessible. And a lot of the SaaS companies that I see present certification at the complete wrong time in the journey, and it's totally detrimental to them. But like if you understand the strategy and where they're beneficial, like you're winning me over a lot as a person who obviously I'm not a certification skeptic. I've just always viewed it as a necessary evil, right? Not necessarily something that could be more broadly beneficial in the overall strategy of your SaaS business.
And that actually makes sense if you think about it, because what do you think about when you think about certification? You think about test. What do you think about when you think about test? You think about being in school and taking a test and failing a test, right? That's what you think about.
Gross.
Right?
No, sorry, you're giving me PTSD.
Spelling bee. I think of a spelling bee and I start sweating because I still don't know how to spell cat.
At least it was over quickly for you, Casey.
That's fair. I got out in the first round.
So yeah, it is a strategy, and you have to build the strategy and understand what your strategy is. It isn't something that you just go and do. You have to have the full strategy around it to make it worth it. And then, as our systems are getting more advanced, we used to only have multiple choice exams for certification. And one of the best certifications out there, and anyone wants a great example of a good certification, is actually Microsoft's Word certification. Word, Excel, PowerPoint. I actually called them up and, young, naive me. Okay, how do I buy this platform from you? Because I want your testing platform, because their testing platform is off the chain. It's really, really cool because it's hands-on in product. But now with so many of the changes and technology advances, we can do not just knowledge certifications, but actually practical hands-on certification. And so the combination, I'm a firm believer that you need both. You need the knowledge certification too, but you also need that practical hands-on. So the combination of the two of them is really where the future is going.
Well, there's a lot for us to think about in the audience today. And Debbie, not to pile anything on, but the name of our podcast is SaaS Therapy. So again, if you've ever gone to therapy, which I have, and you get down to the end, the therapist always says, "Hey, let's work on something this week, Casey. You've talked a lot, sounds great, but let's now take an action item." Debbie, if you can give a call to action to a homework to our audience today, what would it be? What's the one thing that you would want them to go do off of? And it doesn't need to be around certifications; it could be around anything. But what would be the homework assignment?
Start with a jobs to be done framework. Understand what the job is that your customer's actually trying to do with your software. Your customers don't care about your software. They care about what they're trying to do. If you start with that jobs to be done framework and identify the jobs and the tasks they need to do, that is the basis for all of your customer education, all of your partner education, and all of your employee education. That's where we all need to start. And I wish I had learned that earlier in my career, because once I figured that out, it made my life a lot easier.
Yeah, and that has big implications on everything that you do as a customer education professional. And, maybe hopefully prevent creating 8-hour digital courses that your customers have to go to with stuff that they just don't care about. So that's a really, really good advice. I love it, Debbie. Obviously, you're the president of CEdMA. CEdMA.org is where people can go if they're interested in joining and learning more about the organization there. What else would you recommend as far as where we'd point people to if they want to connect with you, Debbie? Just your LinkedIn, Debbie Smith on LinkedIn, or anything else we should point people to?
Debbie Carey Smith on LinkedIn, and I do a lot of chatting with people and helping people understand their space. I spend a couple hours a week just doing mentoring talks with people to help them understand it and figure out what they're doing. So happy to connect with anyone. So hit me up on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you so much again for joining us again, Debbie. It's there's been an awesome conversation. Awesome. Look forward to sharing this with a few people who I know have very similar questions to the things that we talked about today. Right? Really great answers. So thanks. And man, we loved having you on. SaaS Therapy is brought to you by Brainstorm, the SaaS platform for SaaS adoption. Learn more at brainstorminc.com.